Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Right Off Track, the podcast where we venture into unique stories of individuals who have taken the road less traveled to pursue their personal success journey. I'm your host, Anya Smith, and today we're joined by an incredible guest who's making a real impact in the world of tech leadership. Meet Miroo Kim, the founder of People+Culture, a company focused on helping startup founders, entrepreneurs, and venture capitalists thrive. Miroo lives by the words of Bill O'Brien, who said, "The success of an invention depends on the interior condition of the inventor." She's all about inner growth, driving outer results. With nearly 2 decades of experience at tech giants like Apple, Microsoft, and Meta, Miroo has seen firsthand what the human mind can achieve. From predicting iPhone demand to connecting remote parts of the world through technology, she's learned that people are capable of amazing things. But here's the twist. It's not just about technology, it's about tapping into the potential of people within their organizations to achieve long-lasting success. Miroo's a certified yoga instructor, and she's also trained in the Search Inside Yourself program and compassion cultivation training at Center for Compassion and Altruism Research Education at Stanford. She's not here to talk about complex theories or fluffy practices. She's here to guide leaders in practical ways, showing them how inner growth can lead to business success. Join us as we dive into Miroo's journey, exploring the insights she's gained and the framework she's developed. We'll learn how focusing on our inner selves can drive a sense of purpose within organizations. This isn't about lofty ideals, it's about empowering leaders to create environments where everyone thrives. So, whether you're a tech enthusiast, a startup founder, or simply someone looking to make a positive change because you're feeling frustrated, stuck, or disconnected at work, this episode is for you. Get ready to be inspired and motivated as we chat with Miroo. Remember, if she can do it, there's no reason you can't too. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Miroo.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you, Anya. Good to
I'm
see you.
excited. I know it took us a little bit of scheduling time, but you're busy doing all this amazing work. And just to give our listeners a little bit of context, I actually was excited to find you back in the Meta days. So I was somebody who was feeling stuck, feeling a little bit stressed, feel like, oh my gosh, like there has to be another way to then just like always being stressed and working. And you were leading these mindfulness trainings at Meta. And I just found it so helpful at that point in my life. And then I took the Search Inside Yourself training that was also, I'm not perfect. I'm not a great meditator, but I think about it and I go back to those practices all the time and they help me find peace. So I'm really excited to now see what you've done on your own, taking a step further from all those learnings and experiences and now making this a framework for a bigger audience.
Yeah, thank you. And I remember those days when you were in the SLI class virtually, right? Because we were doing it virtually during the pandemic. And you join us for the weekly or daily, maybe for you, session that we were leading for the mindfulness session. So yeah, I really appreciate it. And I think that's the point, that planting the seed, and then so that we can come back to. So even though you don't do it consistently, that's great that you're thinking about it, remembering it.
Yes, the seed is definitely planted, and thank you for you being part of that journey. And I'd love to hear about your journey. So now you are starting your own endeavor, and I want to touch upon that in a bit. But how did you even find the value in all of this? You know, like typically when you think about business, it's about, you know, what are the numbers, what are the goals, what's your business strategy? How did this whole proposition of your inner self come into play for you?
Yeah, I think there are many ways to think about it. The value, I learned this in my own kind of a personal way of learning, or in my work too. But at Meta or Apple, Microsoft, I didn't know this at first, but then probably for the last 5 years, like a year 15-ish, what I learned was that if I keep thinking about the outcome too much, that what I'm gonna make out of it, then it's easier to actually to ruin it, kind of mess it up, or even though I achieve it, I don't feel good about it. So I really think a lot about this tension between intention and expectations. And so the value right now for starting up my own thing is really that I get to be balanced between this intention and expectations. I do have expectations. I want to be successful. You know, I want to create an impact, and then I want to, you know, definitely make money and financial success too. However, if that's kind of too much, if the expectation is too large, too big, and then my intention kind of outweighing my intention, that's not a good place to be. So the value right now is that I get to be very intentional. And this is the intention I set when I was living Meta, was that I want to do something about alleviating suffering in workplaces. Um, and that intention is very loud and clear. And it's the work that I get to do 100% of my time aligned with that intention. So that's a huge value to me to begin with. And yes, there will be other values that it could create, but that's actually very important, a starting point.
I love that. And do you mind me diving a little bit deeper and ask, like,
Yeah.
in your personal journey, was there something that made you crave that mindfulness, that meditation? Was there a sticking point for you where you're like, oh, this is something I could use too? And have you seen then, like, if you could share examples where in your career, like, that actually helped you?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot. I think a lot of people. I'll speak from my own example experience, but I think I share a lot of similar experiences other people might have had too. They started with all my suffering. So, um, growing up, in Korea, really like high achiever country, basically high education rate. So, people are really, really kind of really oriented to achieve. And in that culture, I thought that, okay, then I'm gonna go to good college, I'm gonna get good education, get a good job. So I kind of live by the with the mentality pretty much all my early adult life. And then I came here for the graduate school at MBA, and I did that, and then I got another good job. So I kind of hit all the check mark in a way. And it was probably around the time when I joined Meta that I started feeling really, really something's wrong. It wasn't just something wrong in my head. Also, kind of physically, I didn't feel good, and I feel emotionally very drained. And I thought it was just being that, oh, something's wrong with me. So I try to look for different ways. And I definitely had an experience of also that had a depression. So I kind of kept looking for a reason in my personal life, what's wrong with me. And I realized that it was actually a kind of an expression of burnout. And that's when I started thinking about what can I do to not make this happen again. And more than getting the therapy, and more than just like trying to feel better by myself, right? Going to yoga and or retreat or good vacation, it will make me feel good. But then when I come back to work, kind of get reset.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's you relate to that, right? So that experience was not good, and I wanted to find a way that how can I create an environment where I feel where I can feel grounded and really feel congruent uh, internally and externally. So that's when I started looking for ways to do it, and one of the ways was to look for the programs that I can actually share with other people at work, and then um, so that we can use the same language and then create the same kind of conditions, same culture for that mindset that looking for the well-being at work. So that's when I got trained for the search inside yourself and the compassion cultivation training, yoga. I did it before, so um, it was really the moment when I started offering those courses at Meta that I started seeing how it emerged. And until that point, to be honest, I didn't think that it was possible to feel actually good at work doing my job. And to be perfectly frank, at that point, I didn't really care about my day job that much. I was working in business development for the partnership, and I was good at it. Yet, I didn't really see myself like I'm gonna be the expert in this domain. I didn't really care about it. Um, However, this is the ironic part. During the 5 years when I started offering the program at Meta, that's when I got promoted the most, like in a very short time. So that's the irony, right? Because when you think about it, at the job, it feels like the work is demanding 120% of us, and we give all in, sacrificing sometimes our family life or our health, and then we think that that's the cost it takes for us to be successful at work. That's not true. I did my job well because I was mindful that I was splitting my time between mindfulness programs and then my day job. Yet I was efficient. I was performing better than I did before. So that's the kind of a small example of how that actually showed up. And I think, again, going back to the value and intention that you asked earlier, when I felt when one is really grounded with one's values and really intentional about what they do, then actually brings a lot of actually success in other parts of the life. And also that's when I realized that I could be happy at work. And then so yeah, that's an example and my short description of my journey too.
I love it. I love it. Again, I want people to see like there's overlap in things that we do and how our mind can have positive impacts, even though like those weren't even the primary goals. They can have
Yeah.
consequences that, you know, what's interesting, if you don't mind me adding, I was just
Mm-hmm.
having, honestly, I was trying out coaching with a friend, Earl Talbot, who's an amazing human being. And one thing I was struggling, I'm starting this entrepreneur journey and I feel like so fulfilled in the sense like I really enjoy it. I get to talk to you and amazing people. But I was like, I'm a little overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You know, there's always something to do and it's all good, but it feels sometimes like too much of a good thing. And what he helped me realize like is a lot of times, especially in the corporate culture, we're trying to figure out like the what, the how, and the who in that order. Meaning like
Mm-hmm.
what do I need to be doing, how do I need to be doing it, and who am I in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And he reminded me like that oftentimes in the corporate culture we get so ingrained to think about it that way that we then deplete that focus on ourselves and what do we
Yeah.
want and how do we want to be
Yeah.
doing it. And that was such a
Mm-hmm.
powerful reminder to me, like to be like I need to reclaim that me in it and honor my own filling up my cup and like and reframe my mindset about like priorities around that and not just be doing
Yeah.
the what, let me like achieving the XYZ, which I'm grateful things are coming together, but honoring like doing that shift that I feel like was ingrained in the corporate world to be seen the other way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great insight. And and also underneath all those questions is also why.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I doing this? Why do I want to do this? Or why am I doing this way?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that kind of questioning is very necessary in the process too. And I don't think, to be honest, that so another thing that I also kind of learned in the process is that we blame ourselves so much that oh well, and you know it kind of shows, I mean, many types of what's
Mm-hmm.
right, like self
Mm-hmm.
biohack, you know, all kinds of self developments. It's good, and I'm not against it, and I do a lot of it that too. Yet um it's because we are seeking and it's out of the good intention, right? We want to be better, we want to
Mm-hmm.
feel better, we want to do well. So that's all good. However, um sometimes I think that's founded in the fear, the place of fear,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not doing it enough, I'm not doing it right. Um, and that's actually not a good place to start because then you, to your point, you keep adding on what. So I think that healthy skepticism, like, why am I trying to do this? That's also very important so that we can reset.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and unfortunately, though, I want to acknowledge that the reality, though, that the current culture, especially corporate culture, there are a lot of those kind of a blaming or the criticizing the self and
Yeah.
individual kind of employees.
Yeah.
And even though it's not showing that way, like performance evaluation is kind of one way of doing it that way. And so there are a lot of those conditions that are pounding on us. So
Yeah.
it's really hard to be, first of all, aware of it because there's so many, and also to try to get out of it. So I want to acknowledge that it is hard. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
and I want to like then ask like, so here you are at Meta and you're growing this space and having impact. I know the mindfulness community there was growing and there's great activities. So then what was the inflection point where like, I want to transition and do something different?
Yeah. So those 5 years, from 20, I guess 4 years, yeah, 4 years exactly, 2018 to 2022. Um, I think of it as almost like my own small experience of the entrepreneurship there,
Mm-hmm.
because the community was at when I first joined them, the community started already before me, like 2017. When I first joined the community, it was like 500 people, and then it grew to become like 3,000 people a community when I left, and it was one of the biggest the employee grassroots group club at
Mm-hmm.
Meta, and so the the fun part was that we got to try a lot of things and then see what sticks, what doesn't stick. So we got to keep reiterating. And when I first start offering the programs, I didn't really think about, oh, I'm gonna do something on my own 100%. I didn't really, my mind wasn't even there.
Mm-hmm.
right? But then this is actually the power of the practice too, in a way. I got to practice a lot, and then I got to see a lot of proof points of what I was believing in. And it started from a mere question: is it possible to feel good at work, right? And
I love it.
it is possible, and I got to actually prove the point over and over by offering these programs. And I saw it not just in me, but also in other individuals who are in teams. And so I think that proof points gave me confidence. So around the time, it was really the last 2 years when I felt like, oh, maybe I can do something about this. And the other thing was also that I want to see how whether this works in other places too. And especially when I worked in all the, not all, but a lot of big tech firms like Apple, Meta, and Microsoft. And because they're so big, there are certain limitation in changes as well. And so if you look at all the problems and then the impact of all these tech companies have, right now with the artificial intelligence in the world, it has a really huge power. So yet there are a lot of parts that we want them to be different as a workplace too, because after all these tech companies, people are the biggest asset. And if they're not well, then the outcome cannot be good and the decisions cannot be good too.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking about where should I start? Where should I actually think about bringing this? And it was the startup communities, and then so entrepreneurs, startup communities, and the VCs, because that's kind of the upstream where everything
Right.
starts. And then I kind of started talking to some people, and then that's when I realized, yeah, there is a need for it. However, again, going back to that kind of conditioning of this modern culture, they haven't really thought about this or experimented with this. So I'm really excited about the learning and then where I am now as a result of that. Yeah.
I love that. And I'm curious, like now, like we're going to the root of trying to provide impact. Like, what response are you getting? And like, have there been some things where you have something like, I don't know, that sounds lovely, but is that really what I need to be doing as a startup, as a starting business? Like, where's the ROI on that? What have
Yeah.
you found to be the learnings, and how have you seen those transformations? Like, oh, skepticism to like, oh yeah, I see that. That makes sense.
Yeah. 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 Oh, yeah. I hear a lot of skepticism and a lot of those ROI driven questions. And so, yeah, I think the one main feedback is that, like, oh, how does this actually impact the bottom line of the startup companies? And then from the VCs, I mean, they would want to see their return on the investment.
Right.
So that's one kind of also that's the feedback that I was actually expecting. But again,
Right.
I try not to go with assumptions too much, as I was open to experimenting. And then the other two learnings was actually kind of came out of a surprise. One was that how, from the startup founders and then their teams, how deeply they need it, like how desperately they need it. And to the degree that it's very, yeah, it's very, it's I was gonna use the word sad, but it's not sad. It just I just resonate so much because it's like almost a human need that they want to feel well while they're
Yeah.
doing what they're doing. And I have a huge respect for all the entrepreneurs in the world, not because now I'm one, but because you know human history is entrepreneurship. If you think about
Yeah.
it, right? Like inventing a lot of tools when we were cave people, we were living in the cave 10,000 years ago. Creating different culture, creating the language. All of that efforts were done as an entrepreneurship together.
Yeah.
So, and then we can also take an example of the modern, like right now, that the close examples to us like iPhone and ChatGPT. Like these are great inventions the human do. So I really have a huge admiration of the entrepreneurs, and and they're humans too. So there is this like deep human need for feel well and feel seen and sense of belonging. That was actually very, very prominent among the startup founders too, and then their teams. The dilemma that they keep mentioning that, oh, I don't have time, or we don't have resources or money to do this. That's there, and that's the reality that's constrained given by the current situation. But it's not unsolvable problem. So once actually, and what I also saw there was that when they feel that there's really strong emotional connection, that this is very need And also they see the impact on the, especially for the startup founders, when they see the impact from by paying attention to this, that they get to actually change their perspective and they get to be more intentional and then feel better about how they run the business. Then that emotional connection almost like top over the concern around the money or resource or time. So I definitely confirmed that strong need from the founders and the teams. And then the other thing that I learned was that this is the last point. It's we approach this problem almost like from the mental health perspective. So, but that's it retroactive, right? Mental health, we talk about it after the problem happens mostly. So
Right.
for the founders, it's like, oh, I feel burned out, or for the team, the same thing. And it's almost like we need to shift the perspective. This is an important input. So the well-being of the workplace of the startup teams is actually the condition that's necessary for the success. And this has been proven in many researches that are not necessarily highlighted. But one of the top 5 success for the startups, according to the Idea Lab, was the team, and that's a team health. And so the data is out there. It's just a current system that actually not really well set up to use it as an input rather than as a reactive point.
Yeah, it reminds me
Yeah,
not to diminish information. Like it reminds me like preventative care versus like the cost in medicine, right? Like a lot of
exactly.
insurances are trying to focus on like free preventative care because they realize when you get to a point where things are bad, the cost is really
Yeah,
high. And we grasp that for like our physical. Like, yeah, I totally get that. But for mental, we're like like it's
yeah,
like completely different. It's like oh,
yeah,
preventative care and getting stronger and doing this. Like oh, I don't see the value. I'm too busy for that.
yeah,
But
exactly.
really, it's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, and I think this analogy comes up in my mind that when people were in 1930s or in the early 20th century, when brushing the teeth was not like a just a part of the daily routine, right? And then there was like, oh, brushing the teeth every day, that's weird. Well, now everybody does it. They don't question it because we know that the impact of it as a preventive care too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the same thing with the running and yeah, so I think this is the shifting perspective is very necessary, and there are some VCs or startup founders who are more mindful about this, and then there's some movements around this too. So
Yeah.
I think the time is right without all this support. One kind of also this is interesting, but one feedback that I got from a VC is that yeah, I want to get in the skin of my founder, the founder of this, my portfolio companies, because they are now also see that the inner kind of condition of these founders really matter for the ROI of the businesses too. And we have seen so many cases in the startup world, early days of Uber or the WeWork. So
Yeah.
when they're not in the really right place, then the investors are also wary about what kind of implication it can have.
Yeah.
Um, so that comment was very refreshing to hear that I want to get under the skin of the founder. And it doesn't mean that they want to pry into like the personal problem, but more about I want to take care of this person to be in the right mindset so that the business can also run it from that place.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, like I know we're obviously in a podcast and most people are going to be listening to this, but do you have anything that like people can try like to implement in their day? Funny thing we talked about toothbrushing, like people like mindfulness could be something you do while you're brushing your teeth. People talk about that. Mindfulness is really, again, this is my perception. You can elaborate more probably of my context is about slowing down, focusing on what you're doing in the moment and realizing the power of like getting away from being in the future somewhere else. You're in your head basically, like bringing
Yeah.
back the awareness to where you are in the moment. And the power of that, like for me, is like I'm often in my head and I can sense the energy that has on me being like, oh my gosh, I'm here talking to him, but I have 10 million things I still need to be doing. And when I
Yeah.
if I do focus on that 10 million things, like the energy drain is so substantial. My ability to be
Yeah.
present with Miroo is going to be different. And the
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness is just like claiming back, like little bit by little, when you're feeling really well, like, but what about now? What about this breath? Like, can I honor this time we're having and like the beauty of this moment? And I'm not perfect at it, obviously, but that's what I like try to remind myself, especially usually when it's like, like to breathe, to honor it. And to me, it also builds brought the beauty of listening, which I'm a fast talker, and I always wanted to have like, I want to be able to respond, like don't
Yeah.
want to have that pause. And one exercise that we did in the activity was to be quiet, like sit with
Yeah.
somebody for like 30 seconds and just not say anything. And that was agony to me. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but it is so powerful to honor that. Like, hey, you know what? If we're silent, that's okay. And like deeply listen to another person. Like I try to turn off when I'm on Zoom, turn off myself view, especially because like we have a tendency to look at ourselves when we're talking.
Yeah.
And like, what can we do to like be more intentional, be more curious about the other person, and not worry so much about what we have to say, but really like get deeply into it. And that can be powerful, I think, also for leaders, right? Like so much of that connection comes to like being curious, naturally connecting, and deeply trying to understand the other person. So I find like that's how mindfulness ties into my view of what I can do to be better for myself as an entrepreneur and a human being. But are there things that you would recommend people doing, like even small things, to benefit from
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. I want to actually kind of invite you too, if you don't mind
Oh, of
experimenting a little
course.
bit.
Of course.
Let's take a 3 deep breath. You don't have to close your eyes.
Okay,
So the
no?
first breath, you don't have to. Hmm. And this time I invite you to breathe through your nose with your mouth closed. Great. One more time, feeling the whole breath. Inhale and exhale. It only takes 7 seconds, and I think it changes everything. Um, Everything not isn't just a perspective, because even after that, I see people like coming back to that kind of thinking head again. Uh, I think often as we kind of do this breathing exercise, moment to moment, like whenever during the day, whenever if you find it helpful, is that I sense of belonging. I belong here. And it's
Mm.
not that everything is fine. Everything is not fine. The world is on fire. There are so many problems, right? The business going
Yes.
which direction. It's not that everything is fine, but I belong here and
Mm-hmm.
I am fine. I think that's the really important, kind of a really, feeling or sense of the state that we need to have, if you want to do well, intentional for everything that we do. So so sense of belonging for ourselves, and that way we can also create the belonging for other people. I think that's very important as a leader too, and for ourselves and for as a leader as we show up in the world. So that's the first thing that I would really recommend. Just taking a breath, and in case that they're interested about why breath, there's a great book by James Nestor. It's called The Breath. Breath has a huge science behind it. I think a lot of people who are listening to your podcast
Yeah.
might be aware of it too. And I think the other thing that I want to bring in as a perspective is you can call it method or perspective, is the sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think especially for the entrepreneurs, there are a lot of solopreneurs nowadays. I'm one of them, and then you're two, and there are many of them, especially on the right of track, because they are trying to do something very different from what they
Yeah.
were on track, right?
Yeah.
So the thing that's important is that we are not we cannot do everything by ourselves, right? We don't do anything by ourselves, to be honest, right? So there's nothing that I might have done breathing. I can do the breathing by myself, but it feels much better to do with you,
Uh-huh.
right? So I think the sense of community is really critical for whoever, whether you are at work, in a big corporation, or solopreneur. And the irony is that even in a big corporations, it's so easy to feel lonely.
Mm.
And that's why there are a lot of arguments around these days about work from home and then return to work.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons that a lot of people who are really agreeing with the return to work say that, it creates more loneliness because people are working separately, from their home. But I kind of argue that, that the sense of loneliness was there already, even
Yeah.
when you were in the office, because we are so kind of siloed for our own task, and that kind of a culture that driving that, it's your impact, it's your performance. but nothing is done by ourselves. So um, I think that it's important to create a system and really kind of almost like a practice the system
Mhm.
for ourselves that we are doing it with other people. And what I mean by the system is that, maybe you can have your own board of directors, informal board of directors, right? You can
Yeah.
identify like 3 or 5 people who care about you, right? Mentors or who really care about you, but who are not directly interested with your success, right?
Hmm.
Who doesn't have any stake in your success or failure. Um, so having those people and then, having a regular board meeting, so to speak, so that you feel always supported by them, and you do the same thing for other people too, like a kind of paying back in that way. Um, or maybe you could actually be, circle of people that you feel connected to. Maybe it's a group of solopreneurs, if you're a solopreneur, that who are working in the same field and then get together. I know Nicholas was here on your podcast
Yes.
too, and I think that's why what he's doing with the changing work is so great. That it brings us together who could feel potentially very lonely doing what we're
Yeah.
trying to do, um, and then doing the same thing at the workplace too. That's why I think it's really, really important to invest for the companies to invest in
Mhm.
the ERG, not because of all the diversity agenda that the company has, but because the sense of community is really what makes the workplace very cohesive and healthy.
Mhm.
And there could be a lot of good things that come out. The last 5 years in Meta, I would have left already without if it were not for the actual mindfulness club at Meta too. So so I think that community is the creating system of community for you, however it works. That's really, really necessary.
Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
it's funny you say that. When I was thinking about what I really want, like for a long time, even at Meta, while I was surrounded this amazing place that apparently everybody wants to work on or something like that, I was craving a network that would inspire me. And I'm not saying that I didn't like feel so grateful for my coworkers and their amazing leaders, but I didn't feel connected to people who were like entrepreneurs or people who were doing things like I don't even know how to start. And that was the
Yeah.
inspiration for this. And I hope our listeners like feel that like here you're part of this community of people who are trying to live with purpose, do more, challenge themselves,
Yeah.
and fail and struggle and all that good stuff. And so, thanks for joining this community. And like, feel free to connect
Yeah.
with like Miroo and other amazing people who are doing this. Like, you are part of this, and I hope that that's where you're here listening to this. So, and I appreciate you being there. Miroo, speaking of that, I want to
Yeah.
touch and kind of honor your work of people and culture. And also, if you want to touch on also the layoff grief party, like some of the work that you're doing, can you share a little bit like what is that about? What is your current focus and kind of mission that people should be aware of? And maybe they can also work with you around that.
Yeah. So something that I keep thinking about in the people and culture context is that it says the name of my solopreneur ship
Woo!
business. Who knows? It might grow, it might not. And I'm again, no expectations, just intentions. And the intention is that I want to create a workplace of well-being. And one thing that I keep thinking about is that you cannot force the culture.
Mm.
You can create a condition for the right culture, but you cannot force it because at the core of it, there are people. Um, and then through the sense of community, the culture is created. So that's kind of how I think about it. And so there are many things that we are trying now. I say we intentionally because it's not just me too. Again, I
Yeah.
have a lot of collaborators or thought partners who are helping me out. So I say we very intentionally. And one of the things that I tried out it was that layoff group party. It started as almost like a reaction to the whole mass layoff that a lot of us suffered through since last year. And I think it was there are more than almost like at this point 700,000 people in the tech, at least in the tech industry, who are laid off since 2022. It's a huge amount of number, and I wasn't part of it. I left before the layoff carnage started in Meta. However, it still applied to a lot of people, everybody, right? The people who left behind, who survived through the layoff, but they mentally, emotionally is taxing on them. And then the people who are laid off, of course, layoff is actually one of the top 10 stressors
Mm-hmm.
globally, according to
Yeah.
research. So that's to also for the whole community at work. It just suffers, everybody suffers. Um, so I studied it right away in November, and the intention was to really gather and create a space for people to grieve together. And I used the word party because I didn't want to make it like, oh, this is so like place just a sadness.
Yeah.
And any kind of emotion belongs. So I've done I think 6 so far, and it's been very heartening, very humbling, and yeah, I saw all kind of spectrum of emotions too. Some anger, some just deep sadness. Also, some people feeling a bit of relief,
Yeah.
ironically, a relief, and some people feeling very devastated about this destruction of community, disconnect, right? On both sides, people who are still there and the people who are laid off. So again, it's just confirmed with me that yeah, the importance of community at work, um, and how our relationships are. Even though we want to have a rich relationship with in any part of the domains of life, work relationship is really important because we spend so much time there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the community at work is really critical, and the relationship. And to your point that you felt very disconnected with other people even though you're there, and but we spend a lot of time there too, right?
Yeah.
So that's actually kind of brings up the importance again. So I learned quite a lot that the sense of the community there through that by doing it, and how actually the companies could change the way they do it. I've been in that kind of leadership role too, so I know why they have to do it too in the way that way. And there are systematically there has to be a lot of changes, but it can be done differently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really strongly against that. It's been done that way, so as a result that we have to do it, keep doing it that way. That's not the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
So and kind of along with that, the startup yourself program or the product that I created under the People+Culture with other people was that to not make it as a in terms of the topic of well-being at workplace, it's not an individual responsibility. I saw a comment onto one of my LinkedIn posts that, oh, it's an individual choice. And it's not a choice, it's a right, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a right that we want to feel well while we work. Who wants to feel horrible while working?
Yeah.
No. So it's our right. And but then when but then right now the tendency is individual responsibility, so you have to take care of yourself. Yes, that's true, but also there has to be some systematic support that should happen too. So the startup yourself is kind of focusing on both internal support system and then external support system. How can they you have to both together? So part of it is kind of learning about some concepts many people might not be aware of in terms of emotional intelligence. And then also part of it is the practice, what I can do by myself um, for myself. And then the other part of it is that what I can do with my team,
Mm-hmm.
and also what kind of systems that I can create around myself, such as that board of director or the coaching circle that I mentioned briefly. And there is other more. So it's really bringing the systematic perspective. And I'm a huge fan of James Clear, that what he talks about, that it's a system that makes you feel you succeed, not the goal. And I strongly agree with that. And I've seen that I think over and over, as I mentioned in the mindfulness, that the proof that we confirmed over and over is a system of mindfulness and practice that actually makes us succeed.
Oh, I love that, Maria. And just, I want to ask, how can people find you and work with you? Like, what are some best ways? I'm going to obviously post everything in the description, but if somebody's like, oh my gosh, Maria's like, I love her approach, I want to bring this into my life, into my startup, how should people find you?
Yeah. So I think I'm right now currently, like, my website is actually under construction. So the website is not public. Uh, so that's, you can see how early I am in a way. However, you can find me on LinkedIn under Miroo Kim. Or People+Culture, then I'll still be able to respond, but it's probably easier to find Miroo Kim. And I recently did a write up for 30 days. I was part of the Shift 30 for 30. And I actually kind of summarize my thoughts and what I did around this topic. So if you're interested in, also you can read it on LinkedIn as well.
I love that. Yeah. So if you're listening, like check it out, share your questions, share your thoughts. Maria's just like I always feel calmer and more at peace when I'm just around you, listening to you talk and whatnot. And it's amazing. You started this conversation saying like you're from a culture that's very, get things done, check all the marks. And then I think it's remarkable to see like how you are still achieving a lot. And now you're an entrepreneur and example to your daughter, right? I forget. And
Mm-hmm.
and like you are balancing like a lot and like balancing this energy of achieving with just like yourself, like what are your values, or how can I make good impact. So it's possible for even the very high achievers to get there.
Yeah, thank you. And so same to you, Anya. And I want to honor and acknowledge that what you're doing is also creating this community mindset too, for
Thank you.
those people who are right off track. So I really, really appreciate what you do. And I have to, I'll just say one more thing. The one, I think the biggest gift that I got from Meta or my corporate kind of career experience so far was actually the people, and then
Mm-hmm.
definitely Meta. That was true through the mindfulness that I got to connect with so many people while I was there through the mindfulness practices and emotional intelligence, like you,
Mm-hmm.
and then a lot of teams, and those are the people that I actually still stay in touch with afterward. The people who
Yeah.
I did the project, like the PMs and engineers, they don't really, I don't know who they are now, and I don't feel
Yeah.
really connected to them, but I do feel connected to all of you who I practice together with. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. And I just want to add one last thing, and we'll do three short bit questions and wrap up. Like
Yeah,
I completely relate to the tribe, and we talked a lot about the corporate tribe, but being an
yeah,
entrepreneur, solopreneur, it's even more important for me. Like there are a
mm-hmm,
handful of people that I WhatsApp every day with, or just message, and I share how I'm doing, how I'm struggling, share my ideas, and to have that tribe is everything, right? Like one is what you're in your head, but having
mm-hmm,
somebody, even if it's like a handful of people, is so powerful. So if you are just starting, like where I was less than 3 months ago, I had no tribe. And I don't mean like people who don't care, like not that people didn't care about me, like, but that entrepreneurial tribe, I had no clue. But I
yeah,
started just sharing my mission, whatever that state was, and evolving and sharing something that I think would help people. And I found that tribe and it's still growing. But if you're there, like, I'm not sure where that's going to go and I don't have that, it will come. Like those
mm-hmm,
people, there are people like Miroo who really care and who have this purpose and entrepreneurial spirit, but also want to help others. And it just
mm-hmm,
warms my heart to see your story and people who like instill that sense like, yes, you can be an entrepreneur and do it with a sense of like community, win-win, supporting one another, having a purpose beyond money, beyond
mm-hmm,
money and title.
mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm gonna wrap. Anything you want to add, and then I will wrap up three short bit questions, so you can go back to your work, to your retreat.
No, no, I thought that was a really good wrap up, and I really appreciate you.
I do too.
Yeah.
Okay, last bit is we do three short bit questions where it's just a short response for the first thing that comes to mind, not have
Mm-hmm.
to think about too long. So we'll dive right in. First one is, if your life were a movie, what genre would it be, and who would play you in it?
Oh, I have a good answer for this.
Oh,
I think some artificial intelligence character will play me. I recently saw After Yang, and that has been really like resonating with me now. So
yeah.
some artificial intelligence character that's really wise. I'm not saying I am, but they're really wise and very calm and have seen all because it has read and watched all the humanity contents.
Oh, I love that. I would see that movie.
Yeah,
Okay.
the sci-fi. Yeah.
What piece of advice would you wish? Sorry, what piece of advice you wish you could give your younger self?
No advice. I had to experience what I had to experience
Oh,
and to be here. So yeah, I don't, I want to, I have no advice. I'll just observe her.
I love that. Okay, last but not least,
Yeah.
in the positive context, going off track is.
In a positive, going off the track is, oh, oh, going off track is like being on a trip, being on a really trip that you cannot expect how it's going to go. But it very makes you curious.
Love that. Well, Mara,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time. It's always a blast. I was really looking forward to this. I'm glad we finally were able to connect because I knew this was going to
Yeah.
be meaningful and deep. And in my life, again, like you've taught me valuable things that I'm taking into this entrepreneurial venture. And really, it's helping a lot. Like for whatever people can think it's fluffy, whatever the ROI, what is that? There is something to realize like just how much value our mindset brings to what we can accomplish. So anybody listening, share what your thoughts are, share any questions. I would encourage you to share this with a friend who might be starting their entrepreneurial journey or just very curious about what they can do more and have a purpose behind it. And I look forward to having you join us next time on Right Off Track. Thank you and take care.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much. Bye.
My pleasure.